Welcome back. Now it's day 2 of the 2025 Investing in African Mining Indaba, and true to the saying, don't reinvent the wheel. Years ago, leader in the mining industry, Anglo-American, spearheaded a successful supplier development model in South Africa, one that can still be used as the sector presses towards meeting the need for critical minerals. David Mparutsa, Head of Enterprise and Supply Chain Development at Absa CIB, joins us with more insight on how supplier development can be used to anchor the future of mining. David, thanks so much for your time today. Now, the theme for this year's Indaba is future-proofing African mining today. What does that look like from a supplier development perspective?
Yeah, thanks, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to the viewers as well. So from a supplier development point of view, I think it is really around understanding where the future demand for mining commodities is going to come from. So big focus on critical minerals, such as copper, lithium, and cobalt. So it's really about ensuring that we can pivot traditional supplier development programs in the mining sector to follow these critical minerals. And some of these minerals don't exist in South Africa, but they do exist, north of our borders, so in markets or in countries such as Zambia, countries such as DRC and Zimbabwe as well. So I believe there has to be a strong focus on starting to build regional supplier development programs where local suppliers, in South Africa can potentially look for opportunities to be part of supplier development programs elsewhere on the continents in markets where these critical minerals exist. So a huge amount of effort that's required around regional collaboration to bring up regional supplier development programs.
So I guess, we're seeing a wave of protectionism across the globe, David, that also just being fueled by some of Trump's policies. I guess then that makes it just more important for the continent to collaborate a bit more when it comes to these supplier development initiatives.
Absolutely. So if you look at the continent itself, population over 1.3 billion. So it is a huge marketplace for mining products as well. Yeah. So we really have to look locally. We have to look locally off our borders and ensure that we can trade with each other. We already have trade agreements such as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's really about making use of that a little bit more to be able to increase regional trade.
And that brings me to my next question. I was going to ask you about the African Continental Free Trade area and whether we are leveraging this and using this enough within the sector.
Yeah, so we are starting to see some green shoots in this space. Interestingly enough, discussions I had with some suppliers who are based out of Ghana this morning, and they are starting to service the region. So not just servicing, a market like Ghana, but they're also looking at neighboring countries such as Togo, and actually trying to, take their services across through those regions. So starting to see some green shoots of this. I think a little more is expected in the SADC region, but starting to certainly see some of it, particularly in West Africa.
Now, in your note, you refer to Anglo-American supplier development initiatives. Talk to me about how that can be used as a case study today and the lessons that can be learned from it.
Yeah, so I think we have to go back to the principles of what constitutes a good supplier development program. And probably the first one is that it should not really be driven by legislation. So it should really be more driven by a company's own internal policies. And companies should really be setting targets that far surpass what legislation requires them to do. So that's the first starting point, right? After that, if you look at the 3 pillars of supplier development, which is access to markets, so ensuring that you give local suppliers and SME businesses access to contracts and purchase orders, that's the first one. Capacity building, very key in this to ensure that these local businesses and these SMEs have the necessary technical skills to be able to perform on those contracts that they received. And then the last one is then access to funding. Once they've received contracts, once they have the technical capacitation to be able to perform on those contracts, making sure financial institutions can provide them with the funding. So it's really about building robust frameworks around those 3 pillars and having strong partners that can develop skills, having strong partners that can ensure that funding is provided. And that's what what really constitutes successful supplier development programs.
Yeah, you mentioned, those 3 pillars and how we can adapt what Anglo has done into, initiatives that could come through today in this day and age. But we can't deny the fact that we have technological advancements, we are in the digital age, and that also kind of putting a risk on job creation.
Yeah, it's a fine balance. And effectively, technology is key, right? So the demands of modern day mining, there is quite a lot of technology that's involved. Whether that is automation, you see machines that are now being automated remotely without even a person manning that machine. Whether it's use of AI and machines now having the ability to learn and to relearn. And ultimately, what we feel is that should drive greater efficiencies, which will ultimately impact your bottom line. So yes, there is a trade-off, maybe from an employment point of view, but you actually should be able to operate your business more cost effectively, again, which impacts your profit and your bottom line in a very positive way.
And, looking at global themes, we are moving into a more sustainable world. How can African suppliers then meet tougher ESG standards to support green and more valuable mining operations?
Yeah, so sustainability is really at the core of any mining operation, and it should be at the core of any supplier within the mining value chain. And it's also a strong focus of this year's Indaba. I think local players really need to ensure that they have the skills, they understand what sustainability is, and they can actually measure their own carbon footprint, right? So they need to consider things like using renewable energy, within their production process. The principles of the circular economy also very key in this, in ensuring that you can reuse materials that you've used in your production process. So it's really about understanding what your carbon footprint is, understanding your journey to sort of driving less of a carbon footprint and what you need to do that, and then implementing those policies. So it's core to the mining sector, and it's core to suppliers and the value chain of the mining sector.
David, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your insights. That was David Mparutsa, Head of Enterprise and Supply Chain Development at Absa CIB.